We'd like to welcome everybody for for the start of our new series, Legacy of Leaders. If I could ask everyone to shut their phones, if that would be okay. If that causes you anxiety, you should probably get that checked out. Innate Health Center next door should help you with that, please, guys. Yeah, all right. As well, I'd like to kind of use this opportunity as the first session in the series of explaining exactly what it is that we try to do here with this series called Legacy of Leaders. One of the greatest tragedies I feel of Torah, of Judaism, and of the Jewish teaching is the terrible disconnection that exists between that which we learn and that which we practice. There's so much wisdom, so much rich terminology, ideology within Judaism that has nothing to do with dogmatic practice. And I feel that gets lost in a lot of the noise. And you wind up having people who are Jewish and they're very frum, but they're very far from what Hashem wants and what Torah wants from them. We've all met people like that. And I thought maybe, along with our Rabbanim, if we could take the opportunity to reset a little bit, to kind of revert back, to think back what it was that classified someone as a Jew. What made this tapestry called Judaism? What was it that would wind up identifying someone when we were acting in the way that we were supposed to act? What was it that identified someone with the character traits of being a Jew? Then I think the generation that we look at, the people that we look at, the communities that we look at would look very different. I think as we go through the various characters that we're going to meet, hopefully you and I will learn together from each of them a unique character trait. And it's very difficult when you look at someone like Avraham Avinu, who was such a righteous man, or Sarah Imenu, to try and pick one thing from them when their life was literally, each day, each action was something that we could take so much from. I don't know if any of you has ever met someone remarkable. Has anyone here ever met someone just off the charts? You're in awe of them. I can see some people are shaking their heads, yes. Yeah? Oh, hey! Someone just looked at his wife. That is tons and tons of points. Okay. By the way, this is the downside of sitting separately. You can't see if your husband looked at you. Okay, fine. So what's amazing to me is, if you've ever had the chance to meet someone that's, just so special. I'll just relate an example of this. I had the privilege of praying together with Rav Reuven Elbaz for many tefillot. And you'd see him after the prayers. He would come down off of the bima, off of prayer, and I've never seen anyone pray like Rav Reuven Elbaz has prayed. You don't have to be Sephardi to enjoy this, by the way. Maybe the prayers you might have to be Sephardi to enjoy, right? But you don't have to be Sephardi to enjoy this. He prayed with all of his heart. I remember as a child learning the difference between the word chazan, which means cantor or singer, and shliach tzibur. What's shliach tzibur? What is a shliach tzibur? The word that we use in the Jewish terminology for a cantor is not a cantor. It's shliach tzibur. He is the emissary. He's the messenger of the people. He's the one who walks into the court. He's the lead counsel. He's the man who argues the case in front of the king. So that person, he's not just a singer, right? If he's an amazing voice, but he is a rotten human being, then that's not the person you want. And that's why in the laws of a chazan, of shliach tzibur, along with having a great voice, he also needs to be someone who has good deeds, who people like him, etc., etc., etc. These are all very important qualities of a shliach tzibur, because a shliach tzibur is not the same thing as a chazan. An example of where Judaism goes wrong is when you have a rotten human being who has an amazing voice, and he is chosen to be the emissary of the people. Can you see that? Why? Because on the external level, he says the prayers so beautifully. Yeah, but he's not praying. if everybody hates him, and he hates everybody, if all the time he's getting into fights with everyone in the community, is this the person that represents the community? And I'll tell you, the first time I learned this was when I was 8 years old. I was in my dad's synagogue. I still remember the Chazan was Albert Cohen Saban. And he prayed like from the depths of his soul. And I was so inspired. As a little kid, I didn't quite even understand what all the words were. But when he was praying, you could hear the emotion in his voice, and how when he'd get to the parts where he was asking God to save his life, the life of the community on the high holidays, you could hear his voice catch. You know, he couldn't quite make it through. He would choke up with emotion. And I was standing right behind him, trying to follow along in the prayer book as best as an 8-year-old could. And then he just turned around. I was standing right behind him. And he looked at me, and his eyes, you could see, were red all around, like someone had been crying for a week. It was that moment that I got the idea of what a shliach tzibur is, and how that is different than a chazan. So sometimes you get a chance to meet someone remarkable. And how long did it take for me to have that impression which sits with me today, 31 years later, just like it was yesterday? It was 1 second. So to distill someone like Avraham Avinu is an impossibility. To say this is Sarah, and if we do this, then you're Sarah Imenu, it's ridiculous. However, it is also our job to try and find at least the core midah of that person, something which represented them in their essence, and attempt to bring that out in oneself. I remember when I used to go to the gym, so you're sitting there lifting weights, and eventually you get to a point where you can't lift anymore. You know, you're pushing, 20 pound, 20 kilo, 40 kilo, 100 kilo, and you max out. And you know what the trainer tells you? You're working your biceps, but you don't realize that the explosive motion that begins the lift of a heavy weight quite often requires a different muscle. And they'll tell you to shift to your triceps. And the combination of those two muscles, one which you use all the time, we use our biceps all the time, triceps is a little bit more of an awkward motion in the gym. The combination of those two muscles, one which you don't use as often, sometimes allows you to overcome a challenge that you couldn't do before. So some of these things will come naturally to you, but some of them might be a little bit of a different midah, a little bit of a different character trait. And perfecting these midot, at least the ones of the core kind of characters in the Torah and our forefathers, is very important.